Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. We came back safely from the Thousand Islands in New York, back here in Wisconsin. Man, I gotta tell you, I love that area so much in New York. Upstate New York feels so much like home here in Wisconsin. It really does. Set up the same way, fishes the same way. I was very excited to get the Thousand Islands. I've been there one other time, had a second place finish. And I gotta tell you, my practice was pretty good. Like, I felt really good going into the tournament. As I had mentioned beforehand, that I wanted to target some largemouth. So I spent a couple of days of practice looking for largemouth because I know northern strain largemouth tend to group up, especially on these big fisheries. You have a lot of areas where the largemouth just tend to live and not live. So there's a lot of dead water, but when you can find the good stretches, a lot of times you can catch multiple fish quickly. And I spent the first couple of days fishing some largemouth looking water, a lot of, weeds and docks and grass flats, things like that. And had a pretty good day. The first day, I think I shook off 60 fish that I would consider potentially 2 pound class fish or better. The one thing I will say is the majority of the fish that I was seeing were like, it looked like pound and 3/4 to like 2.5 pound. But in a 2 fish or 2 pound every fish counts format, I knew that a bunch of those bites could actually come into play. So on day two, I did the same thing. I went looking for more largemouth stuff. Found a few areas, didn't find nearly as much good stuff. It really is a place where the good largemouth stuff is pretty obvious. There's definitely some little hidden things here and there, but you don't have the same numbers of fish that live in it. And it's also one of those things where with largemouth, if there were a handful of guys doing it, you could get into a pretty bad rotation. But I was happy with what I saw the first couple days. My day three plan after practice was to find some smallmouth and kind of bring that all together with the largemouth. Look for some smallmouth in areas that were just outside of the largemouth stuff, so I could bounce back and forth. If conditions changed, I could fish for one versus the other. And that third day of practice was fantastic for smallmouth. I've fished a lot of history stuff where I've caught them before. I found some good new stuff. The pattern I was running was fantastic, so you could really go almost anywhere and get bit. And I felt really good going into that tournament. I'm not going to sit here and say I thought I could catch 100 pounds a day, but I did think that I could catch 75 or 80 if things went right. With a bad day being 50 pounds of fish. And I thought that that would be for sure be enough to cash a check and potentially have a shot at making the cut. And for me, that was the main priority because I knew I needed a decent finish or better to qualify for the Bass Pro Tour next year. And yeah, so the first day of the tournament, we were making long drives. We were allowed the trailer. We were making long drives down there. And by the time I launched and started running to my spot, lines in occurred when I was about 2 miles away from where I wanted to start. So I just ended up hitting some new stuff on the way down, just started fishing right away. And on my third cast, I ended up hooking up with a 5 pound class smallmouth, fought him all the way to the boat. It jumped like 3, 4 times. And while I was doing that, the current pushed me up on a shallow flat and he just dove down, after several runs and broke me off on a zebra mussel laden rock. So that was a pretty crummy start. And then within the next five minutes, I lost two other 2.5 to 3 pound class fish. So in the first 10 minutes, I should have had 3 fish for, 11, 10 to 12 pounds probably. And I didn't have any. I lost them all. And that kind of set the tone for that day. Overall, I had 23 scoreable bites. And when I say bites, I'm talking fish that I either caught or had on for a substantial amount of time. I only landed 11 of them. I lost 12. Yeah, so that's like a 1-to-1 land to loss ratio, which is terrible. And most of those fish were all coming on jerk baits. So this was one of the go-tos. This was the Berkeley Stunna 112 +1. This is the shad fillet color, but I can't say color mattered that much. As long as it was somewhat of a minnow style color or a perch colored bait, I had a ton of action on it. This one actually, now that I'm looking at it, has a uh, bass scale still on it. I landed one in the last 30 seconds at like a 2-2 on this, and that's a scale that he left me. So I caught a lot of fish on that. I also was throwing the Megabass Vision 110 plus one. I had 4 different jerk baits on the deck of my boat, various colors. Again, I liked the deeper running versions because most of the fish I was catching were in 14 to 18 foot of water and they were coming up for it, but I could not get them to come all the way up to it. If it was if the bait was too high in the water column, I needed to get the bait down 10 to 12 feet. So the stunner really came in really good for that because it is a slow sinking bait. So I could get it down deeper. It just tends to run deeper on average. So I really like that. And then, the Megabass is a good jerk bait. And I've had really good luck there before on it, which is why I had some of them tied on. And I gotta tell you, so the perch color is the one that I really like in that Vision 110. I think it's called GG Yellow Perch. It's kind of a goldish perch. I lost the couple that I had, but that was the bait I started out with on the first day when I lost 3 in a row. And I gotta tell you, so I've always had really good success with those, and everyone is always criticizing the hooks on them, those cat swage hooks or whatever they're called, being very light wire. And because I tend to fish my jerk baits on light tackle, so spinning gear, a medium light action rod, I don't tend to have an issue with light wire hooks. But in this event, you're talking about big smallmouth, really strong current. I just was bending those hooks out quite a bit on the first day. And I think that was a big part of the lost fish because these fish were coming up and slapping at it. The majority of the fish were hooked on the side of the face or under the belly or under the gill plate. You may have a hook or two in the mouth too, but the majority of the bait was not in the fish's mouth. And from that standpoint, if they were skin hooked, say on the cheek, and they would get the right position with the current, it would just pop those hooks out. The light wire hooks really hurt that. So one of the things, my roommates were catching them a lot on jerk baits too. And Matt Becker had mentioned how he was throwing jerk baits on 15-pound test bait casting gear, going heavy so he could boat swing them. So I made an adjustment during one of the periods where I actually switched over to bait casting gear to think maybe I needed some heavier stuff. And I went with heavier hooks when I did that. And I lost my first 2 fish. And then I was like, man, I just feel like it's too heavy. So then I made adjustments again at the end of the second period where I actually went with the lightest spinning rods I had. Some of these NSJ 841, so 1 power 7-foot rod, really light action rod. And I just decided I would go with that with the heavier hooks, and I landed a good portion of the fish in the third period on the first day. So I kind of felt good about that. Going into the second day, I adjusted and set up all my bait casting or all my jerk bait rods in the same manner. The light action NSJ 841. I was throwing 8-pound test fluorocarbon line with the jerk baits, but I upsized the hooks on both the Stunna and the Vision 110 to the Gamakatsu Aaron Martin's heavier action finesse treble hook. I don't have the exact name of it. I'll put the link in the video description for you. And I think that really helped because they're like light wire hooks, but they're stronger than a light wire hook, and they're laser sharp. All the hooks are laser sharp. The Fusion 19s that come on the Stunna are sharp. The Cat Swage ones that come on the Megabass are really sharp, but these Gamakatsu ones are like 2 times strong. So they penetrated as well, and they held up better with those bigger fish, and then the light action rod really absorbed that. So I felt, like I was able to get the landing ratio thing figured out. Because on day 2, I ended up catching 18 fish, and I lost 6. So that was like a 3-to-1 loss to catch ratio, which is about what the majority of the guys who did well were doing the first couple of days in my house. They were like a 60 to 70% catch ratio on the bites. So the majority of the fish I had were all in the jerk baits. I did on day one of the tournament, I did hit 2 largemouth stretches, really small little stretches, and caught multiple fish, but they were all just under 2 pounds, 114, 115s, things like that. And then on day 2, I also swung in and hit a different largemouth stretch with this guy right here, just a Berkeley 4-inch Pit Boss. This is Skeet's Green Money, 3/8 ounce tungsten weight, just the Texas rig. And had 4 or 5 legals in about an hour on that stretch. Again, like 2 pound to 2.5 pounders, not great quality, but I had that stretch I really wanted to hit because I had multiple bites there in a small stretch, and to catch 4, I think it was 5 in that hour, you know, was pretty solid. So that was kind of the go-to. Those were the 2 baits I caught everything on. In hindsight, was going for largemouth a good thing? I probably, if I could do it all over again, I would have kept the first day of practice because those fish did pay off a little bit. And then day 2, I would have looked for a little bit more, maybe smallmouth stuff. The thing is, the smallmouth pattern I was on was great. I didn't need to practice it. Pretty much everywhere I went, I think one place each day I hit, I didn't catch a fish on. So I mean, once I identified what they were holding on, I could look at the map chip and run around and find those spots. I wish I had a spot though that was more of a flat where there was a bigger school of fish. I was fishing areas with 1 or 2, well, there were probably 5 or 6 fish on it, but once you got one to bite, the spot wouldn't go. Some of the flats, in hindsight, watching the guys who did really well, they had areas where they could put the boat down, fish it for a while, and not leave. So yeah, I probably would have spent more time in practice looking for a bigger flat with a concentration of fish on it. But I really thought I had enough to get into the cut, have a good tournament, get out of there with money and points to make BPT. And now it looks like I'm the first man out of the BPT, which is really a bummer because I love that format. I love fishing those events. I just, you work your butt off to get there, and then you have, one bad year, and I'm going to potentially get bounced at this point, which is not good. I tend to, if I look back over my career, this is year 14. I think I've had 3 or 4 years. It's like I'll have 3 good years, 1 mediocre year, 3 good years, 1 mediocre year. And well, this is like I've had 3 good years and now I've got a mediocre year in the middle of it. And it just happened to be a bad time to have a mediocre year. And this was just the year of lost fish. Every tournament except for one, I've had the fish on to make cuts or cash checks in every one. And I just have had some misfortune this year. Last year, everything seemed to go right and we had our shot at AOY. This year, I've been having some trouble putting them in the boat. Anyways, still a fun time. I mean, if I wasn't hooked up with a keeper fish, I caught a ton of little fish, or you had fish coming up looking at your bait. It just was a constant battle, and it's a fun place to fish. So now at this point, I guess the BBT season is wrapped up. We did qualify for heavy hitters for next year. We've got the team event coming up here in a couple of weeks in Erie, Pennsylvania. And hopefully we can end this year on a high note. Otherwise, I appreciate all you watching, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Stay tuned. We'll have a new video coming out tomorrow for you.